types of churches are the most important language you're going to pick up on this weekend, because it's going to be something formative for your churches going forward, all right? So there's two things I want to jump back to the healthy missional markers on just for a moment with you. Number one is, some of you are sitting there and you're anxious at the missing component of the 10 healthy missional markers. Does anybody want to take a wild stab at what that is, what's missing on 10 healthy missional markers? Do I help you a little bit? A lot of people look at it and say, we don't see prayer anywhere in the 10 healthy missional markers, right? And the reason why is twofold. Number one is prayer has to infuse every single one of them. It's assumed as a part. You're not going to have compelling Christian community without people who are sharing their hearts and their faith journey. You're not going to have heartfelt worship with people who don't pray together. You're not going to have intentional evangelism if you're not praying for people who don't know Christ. Okay? So prayer is infused into every one of them. Plus, if you put prayer on a list, you know what people tend to do? Pray and say, that's done. Now what's next? Just saying, okay? The second thing I want to encourage you to be careful of is that some of you are deep and profound thinkers, brilliant theologians in your own right, and you stand head and shoulders above the rest of us, and I commend you for that. But please, 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 please do not take time to rewrite the 10 healthy missional markers in the better way you know how to say them, okay? Because what you will contribute to is a spirit of confusion. Because you'll say, oh yeah, compelling Christian community, I don't like that word. Here's a better word. And you will constantly be correcting this for the rest of your life. Because the 10 healthy missional markers are nice and simple, and that's how they're printed, and that's how a lot of us have learned them. And we can't relearn them now, okay? So flow with us just a little bit if you would. Because otherwise you're going to be so wrapped up in wordsmithing, you're going to miss the obvious things that are there, all right? You might find the hangnail, and you're going to miss the tumor. I'm sorry. Does that help you get the picture here? So 10 healthy missional markers. Now we want to move on to the next thing, are the 4 types of churches that we found. And one of the fun things in our partnership with the Covenant Church is that they are very similar size-wise and history-wise to the Reformed Church in America. Their primary difference is they have Swedish roots, and we have more of a Dutch root to them. I told them if I could learn to pronounce J's in people's last names, I could be a Swedish covenant pastor. But those J's, do they mess you up? Have you ever seen those covenant names with those J's? Just kind of in the middle, there's a J in the middle of the guy's name, and they say it. And I can never quite catch how that works. But anyway, so we have all these different kinds of churches, and so we're the primary thing we've been talking about first, and we want to look at what are these 4 kinds of churches. And I want to grab a marker here so I can write as we go. So I'm going to draw a little diagram for you. This will be important for you, and you'll understand why by the time I'm done here. But the first of and these are all what we call established churches, which means probably for a church plant somewhere after year 3. All right, so it doesn't take very long. But for the most part, we're thinking churches that may have been established 12 years or longer. Okay, just give it a ballpark idea. So we're thinking established churches. The first thing we come up with is a healthy missional church. So as Gary read through those lists of what do we see happening, people coming to Christ, people growing in Christ, people praying together, people experiencing heartfelt worship, those are all things that happen on a regular basis. It's consistently happening. So we do this in a little diagram shape here of 4 different church types. HM is for healthy missional, all right? A healthy missional church. In a healthy missional church, we see those different things happening in a consistent basis. You've got them there in your outline. And I'm not going to read them through again and again because it gets very redundant by the time we're done here this evening. And I want to get on to some things that are that are helpful for us to understand beyond just what we see. So what do we feel in a healthy missional church? We feel a sense of anticipation. In a healthy missional church, you want to go to church. You do not dread going to church. There's a sense of gratitude. This is in my top 2 characteristics of people whose lives are intimate with Jesus. It's gratitude. In a healthy missional church, they're grateful for all that God has done and is doing. There's a sense that we're accomplishing something, we're going somewhere. I heard a lot of you talk about that. You guys talking about being engaged locally and things happening within the life of the church. There's enthusiasm and energy. It's not like, oh, there's one more thing to do, People are engaged in the ministry, they're involved. There's a sense of unity and love. Even when you're not on the same page exactly, there's still an appreciation for where people are coming from. There's a sense of respect for each other. And can you imagine that in a healthy missional church where things are growing and changing all the time, there's a little bit of sense of chaos going on? Now, what do we claim as our claim to fame in good Reformed polity? That things are done what? Decently and in order, right? Please understand that that may be the nemesis of a healthy missional church sometimes. Because the Spirit doesn't always... If you've read through the book of Acts, does the book of Acts read like a nice, clean, easy, smooth road to take? It's not, is it? Inside and outside, there's stuff going on. What do we hear in a healthy missional church? We sense the presence of God here. People think maybe it's not that the morning that your life is turned inside out, but you heard the story of somebody whose life was touched. Maybe it's not the morning when your life was changed, but you heard the story about somebody whose life was changed. And so we know God is at work here. We're glad to be a part of something special. We're making a difference in this community and beyond. That we're not just kind of absorbing everything for ourselves. We'll do whatever it takes. How can we keep moving forward with God is the question that we hear in this kind of a church. Where it's never like, oh, great, we've arrived. We are there. No matter what you're doing, there's always a sense that God could do more and stretch us further, not beyond our means, but provide according to His riches, right? In a stable church now, so we're keeping moving here. In a stable church, we see a lot of those same things still happening, but you notice the percentage drops? Maybe half to three-quarter time. Those things are still going on. And we're grateful for those, but they just don't happen quite as often. We used to have a testimony maybe every week or two, and now we have a testimony every month or two. It just doesn't happen quite as often. We don't see things moving along in quite the same way. And again, the what do we see part, you can go through those. But what do we feel in a stable church? It's safe and comfortable, but the key word on this statement is foremost. Safe and comfortable for most. Because in a stable church, there tends to be a long tenure related to the people who are in a stable church. And so they think it's fine. But for other people, there's a low level of frustration. It's like, I don't think this is quite how it should be. Or maybe I've been here for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, and I just can't figure out how to get on the inside. I've never been asked to help make a decision in that church. And I don't think this is how it's supposed to work. So there's a sense of feeling self-sufficient. The self-sufficient part is dangerous. Isn't that we don't need other people. We get to feeling we don't need God to run our church, really. All is in order organizationally. What do we hear? We're doing fine, right? I was at the consistory meeting. We had enough money to pay the bills. What more do we need? Who wouldn't like our church? I love our church. Well, if they could get inside the circle, they might like it too, right? We're a warm and friendly church. Now, let me just tell you, the sacrifice of being here this weekend has little to do with being away from my family and my home and everything else. It's supposed to be 80 degrees in Seattle today. This is not a warm and friendly town today. Can I tell you that? What do we hear? People saying, don't mess up the building. We just fixed the carpet, Don't bring coffee in the sanctuary. God could get spilled on, right? And God would go away if he got some coffee spilled on him. Isn't that the problem? Yeah. Let's talk about it in the next meeting. That's just too intense right now. We don't have time and energy. It's not that important. Not that urgent. And let me tell you, I got to give you one more thing for Matt and for Mike here on this one, okay? I'm not going to put it up on the board, but let me just tell you that the seminary trains pastors to be pastors of stable churches. Sorry. Melissa, my wife, and I were debriefing after our Veritas weekend. We go a little walk in our neighborhood, and she nailed it. She says, I didn't know that stable isn't good. We've been content to be stable in the life of the church for too many decades. We've learned to be stable. We've raised up stable as the gold standard for the life of the church. And it is not true. It is not true. So, sorry guys, you can ask for your money back. I think it's already spent though. I trust that what you pick up here this weekend will help you. And I'm not saying it's bad. I love what I learned in the seminary has been invaluable to equip me for pastoral ministry. I'm just saying that I was trained to work here and keep people feeling comfortable and fine. I was not trained to look through the eyes of Christ that the world is broken and we need to do the transformation. Matt, maybe they've changed, and maybe you're in great shape, but I'm just telling you that for me, that's what somebody's tend to do. The next area we want to look at is what we call critical moment. What's happened to our percentages in the critical moment church? Keeps going down, doesn't it? So now what we used to hear once a month, we maybe hear once a quarter if we're doing well on those good things that are going on. And again, you got the list there. You can go through that. You can see that. But it's just inconsistent. It's not happening on a regular basis. And it's more happenstance. We kind of have a big happy party when it happens. Once in a while in class somewhere, we have a worship service. Well, that was a good one today. But if we come back for 3 more months, we might have another good one someday. But there's no sense of really being an ongoing sense of God's presence. What do we feel in a critical moment church? We feel a bit of anxiety. Because we start looking around and we look and we say, you know what, the trajectory we're on is not a good trajectory. We feel a little bit inadequate. What can we do that we're trying things and it's not turning around? We kind of feel this continued drift. A little bit of fear is beginning to perk through. And we're a little bit confused about what's going on in the life of the church. What do we hear in a critical moment church? We're on a trajectory that we don't feel good about, all right? Usually we have this conversation every February when the consistory has to sign the annual consistorial report form and send it to the denomination in a critical moment church. I say, ooh, do you see where those numbers were last year? Has it gone that far in just a year's time? There's kind of this awareness, but then, we somehow kind of find ourselves saying, well, let's kind of keep on going past that. And then, why are people leaving is another question we ask in the critical moment church. We're kind of confused and perplexed about, what's going on. That people that we thought were really a part of things, but the frustration has just come to a point where they're kind of walking away. Sometimes they fade away, sometimes they kind of go stomping out more, but it's really hard. We sense that something's wrong. We're not quite sure what it is. And when we look in the mirror, we're not what we used to be. We think, there were days that were better than this. This is not what it used to be. And then we come to a point where what's interesting is a critical moment church is not in a bad place to be because they realize that there's a moment of truth. I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about the differences in the 4 types, but I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So then the last kind of church that we want to look at is what we call the at-risk church. What happens to our percentages here? Right. So these things rarely or never happen. Sometimes in these churches you start talking about these things that we hope we see happening, and they say we can't remember the last time, and you fill the blank behind it. We can't remember the last time this happened. We can't remember the last time that happened. We can't remember the time we've never had. This hasn't happened in that way. What do we feel in an at-risk church? There's a sense of anger. We're really upset and we're bothered by what's going on. We might even be a little mad at God. We tend to want to blame other people. Well, what happened is so-and-so, they didn't do their part. They were supposed to plan the class, and they didn't even show up for class. They were supposed to plan the potluck, and they didn't even let anybody know there was going to be a potluck. And there's somebody else is always a problem, which is one of the characteristics of an at-risk church, is that nobody who goes to the at-risk church is a problem. They're all fixed, but everybody else is a problem in the world around them. There's kind of a sense of sullenness. It's not a good mood. There's a sense of inferiority. There's a spirit of grief and loss going on. And emotionally, people are feeling very drained. And spiritually, it's hard to keep an even keel when you're going through all this stuff. There's denial. There's a sense of feeling of having been betrayed. One of the great lines that we sometimes say, well, only if the classes had done their part. You know, classes should take care of existing established churches better. But they're not doing their part. So we find somebody else to again, blame for it. Or we feel like we've been left out, thrown under the bus. We feel defeated. And there's a poor sense of congregational self-esteem that we experience. What do we hear in that risk church? People are saying, why even bother? This is not going to be turned around. We hear people saying, no one's going to take my church away from me. Right? We're going to keep the doors of this church open no matter what. And then there's that kind of, if we only had, you can fill in the blank here, if we only had $10,000, if we only had 3 new families, if we only had a better church van, if we only had a better preacher, if we only had, just whatever you want to fill in the blank there, in at-risk church, there's always something that if they had it, everything would be different. The whole world would be different. All we have to do is hang on and God will help us. Back to, remember what Gary read? The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. There's a sort of sense that we're good and God's going to pull us through this no matter what. Well, God might have brought you to a point of serious heart searching and soul searching, is calling you to a come to Jesus moment in your life when you're in an at-risk church. And God would never let our beloved church die, is one of the things that we like to say, when we're in an at-risk church. We're a family here, and we'll do whatever it takes to keep our family together. And that's not talking about genetics here either, all right? There's people who have bonded together. We're one in Christ. We're brothers and sisters, and we'll make it through this thing. And then it's all somebody else's fault, so you kind of fill in the blank. Or remember the good old days. When a church's dreams, when a church's memories exceed their dreams, they're in big trouble. All right? When the church's memories exceed their dreams, they're in big trouble. So I want to point out a couple things for you on this architecture here that we have. That the most difficult journey on this grid to become healthy initial is this one right here. Does anybody want to give me a guess why that's the hardest one? You're comfortable. Complacent. Who needs it? We don't need to go on the path. What's the point of it? Another thing that's important for us to understand is that the goal of every type of church is to become healthy and missional. It is not an incredible accomplishment of the kingdom of heaven that an at-risk church becomes a critical moment church. God is not doing a happy dance over that yet. Okay? Are you with me here, folks? We want every church moving toward healthy missional wherever they're at. Now, here's something that's kind of interesting for churches that sometimes being over a critical moment, it's not a fun thing to do. We've been there ourselves. I've been in rooms where churches identified with this, and they said, this doesn't feel good. We don't like being a critical moment church. That doesn't feel like God's doing what we want God to do in our midst. But this is one of the most movable churches on this grid because they still have resources, they have a keen sense of awareness, and they don't want to become stable. They move straight across here and become healthy and missional. So we kind of call this the law of diagonals on this grid. That the critical moment church can get to healthy missional faster than any other one. And the reality is, we're going to talk a bit more tomorrow in the life cycle of the church that Gary referred to, about how difficult it is for an at-risk church to become a healthy missional church. It can happen. God is in the resurrection business, right? They only raised 3 people. Healed a lot more. Now, I want to give you one more thing that's been kind of a fun way for me to think of this, because sometimes these are kind of academic categories, and those are words I don't often run around using those words in my everyday vocabulary with folks talking about my church. But here's some words that you might be able to identify with a little bit more. I like to think about these in kind of what I call food categories, okay? So the at-risk group, they're the leftover group, all right? And I say that because you can live on leftovers, but you just can't do it for a long time and really be happy about your diet. And there's some things like, isn't a good stew really good the second day? But how about the 30th day? haven't we had this before? Really? Right? There's not a lot of life in leftovers, not a lot of excitement. You don't come home, with Pavlov's dogs salivating about dinner because it's leftovers again for the third time in a row, right? Then we move up to the critical moment, which I call the critical moment the cleanup committee. Because the 80-20 principle, where 80% of the people get served by 20% of the people who do all the work. These are the people who, they're the last ones to leave after every function at church. They make sure every table is put back in the closet, every chair is put back in the rack, everything is picked up off the floor. They even get the vacuum out to help the janitor out, because the janitor works so hard at church, they want to make sure that things are taken care of. And they do all this work. But every once in a while, if you're on this cleanup committee, you realize you have this thought that goes through your mind. Doesn't anyone else care like I do? Okay? So it's difficult to be on the cleanup committee all the time. You get a little bit tired being there. And part of the reason you get tired is this is the 80% category, because these are the people who dine at the local buffet. They go to the buffet, they want to be served, right? When they go to the buffet, they don't want to have to cook anything. They don't want to have to clean anything. They want anything they want to be there. They want to be able to take one bite and say, this is yucky. I'm not going to eat any more of this, and just leave it on their plate and go back and get another plate and load up again. And they'll just keep eating and eating and eating and eating, and they don't care. As long as the food's being prepared for them and they're being served, they never have any expectation of doing anything good with the food they're eating, outside of just kind of gorging on it. But this is where we want to be. Do you want to guess what food category describes a healthy missional church? I think you'll love this one. It's a potluck community. You know why? 2 reasons why. Everybody brings their favorite dish to a potluck, and they bring it to share. Right? Everybody brings their favorite dish to a potluck, and they bring it to share. So think a little bit about that. I hope that helps you to get a feel. What questions do you have about these 4 church types? Is there anything that's unclear from what Gary and I shared with you here, kind of just walking through? You don't have a question now. When I give you your homework assignments for the night, you'll probably have your hands going up like, wait, teacher, I have a question before you give us a test. Can we stall for just a minute here?
How does this interact with vitality isn't the goal?
How does this interact?
Is vitality synonymous with healthy missional church, or
it
sounds like healthy missional church is the goal, but vitality isn't?
Good question, Matt. Mark, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. I think the thing is, both the vitality becomes a product of being a healthy missional church, which is engaging in healthy missional activity over a long period of time. If you go back to 2 Corinthians 3:18, right, that we're being formed in Christ, and it's an ongoing process. It's a lifelong journey. It's the sanctification process of our life. And so, if it's helpful to understand that this is a permanent status for us to be in, is moving toward healthy missional. We don't, it's probably even a little bit artificial to see it as a complete circle down here. So we're on our way, and vitality is the grace gift of the Spirit's work in our life in that journey a little bit. So, and please understand, these are not like exclusive, tight, little rigid categories that you can't get a little bit of flow on. But does that make sense that we engage in activities? It's a little bit like spiritual disciplines, right? So maybe spiritual discipline in our life is to read the Bible every day, all right? So we could do that, and it can be a lifeless exercise if the goal is just to check it off our list and do it. But if we're willing to open our lives up and listen to God speak into our lives, something that brings vitality into our heart can happen through something that we're doing that might be rather rote in appearance, but life-giving in its engagement. Mm-hmm. So that's how I'd answer that probably. But it's a great question, because it is easy to kind of start saying that, and there's a couple of places on the pathway that I've had that same question, thinking, well, aren't we kind of saying? Because the other thing we say is that these categories transcend ethnic identity, transcend location, whether it's urban, suburban, rural, whatever it might be, transcend size. But when we have to record our annual report to the denomination, what do we send into them? Numbers. How many people have joined your church? How many people left your church? How much money do you have coming in? How much money do you owe? We send in all these numbers, and we get so locked into it, and those numbers become very lifeless. Like Gary said, if you're in a community that's not growing dynamically, you may not have a lot of new people coming in. That number of attendance may not go up, but that does not mean you're not healthy and missional. You could also be in a church. I think there's time. So in Seattle, there was a church that was very dynamic and dramatic and growing and becoming a multi-site, in fact, becoming a multi-state, multi-site ministry that literally had numbered in the thousands of people who were involved in it. And the senior pastor imploded, and there's not a single one of those churches existing as that church. Now, some of them spun off and established an independent thing, but most of those churches are gone. Because they were counting numbers, they were counting vitality they were counting numbers as evidence of being healthy and missional. But what we found out was that culture of godly leadership was not undergirding the ministry. And when that unraveled, the whole thing unraveled. It's a very sad thing for the kingdom because it makes your job and my job harder because people who aren't in the kingdom say, see, how are you different from that? Right? So, think a little bit about that. So now I want to give you a homework assignment. If you turn to your slide that says guidelines on it. So this is a game that we call X marks the spot. And your homework assignment is to go home and prayerfully reflect on those qualities. And this is an open book as test, okay? So go home and read those qualities again that Gary went through and that we looked over and said they happen regularly, infrequently, on through. And what we want you to do is don't jump to where you think it goes, but take time to reflect and say, as I've thought about this most characterizes our church. Now understand, these are not 4 hard and fast quadrants that we're in. So when you put an X marks a spot on this grid tomorrow morning, and we're all going to do this, okay, then we all get to participate, you don't all have to say something, but we want everybody in the room tomorrow morning to participate. That you can put your X anywhere on here. So you can put it between a circle, in a circle, close to the middle, whatever you want to do. And then you get to add something to your X, which is very important. You get to add an arrow to it. So you put an X somewhere on here, and then you put an arrow for which way it's going. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to invite Sanborn and Esterville to have their own chart tomorrow, okay? Because one of our key principles is that you only, that this is something that's so personal to your church, you can't just throw a whole bunch of X's and arrows on here that come from all over the place. It's a very personal, and you're going to find tomorrow morning a very moving moment in the life of our retreat together. And so we're going to break it out that way. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to give each of you a chance to break it out. We have a couple different rooms even, I think, we can make that work tomorrow morning. And so we're going to walk you through that process where you can do that. So you're going to put an X on there for where you think it most describes your church, and then an arrow for the direction. And the arrows can go anywhere. I've seen people make artistic work out of the arrows. Well, we were going this way, but now we're going back that way. But we want to go this way, or we were going this way for a while, but then it went that way, but now it's going this way. You are free to put however you want, and then what you have. And we time this because some people have been known to slightly exceed the time limit. But you get 1 minute to explain why your arrow is going where it's going and what you mean by it. So you can say, okay, I put my arrow here, I think it's going this way because, and what I would encourage you to do is look through those characteristics again and find a story that illustrates why you put your X where you did. I put my X here because I was on a mission trip and I saw people's lives being changed on a mission trip. And I think we're beyond stable and moving toward healthy and missional. Great. I put my X here and said we're going toward a critical moment because I was in a conversation in town and they were saying things about our church that were very unflattering, but they were true. And we aren't dealing with some things that are happening in the life of our church, and we need to be aware of that and come to grips with that if we want to become a healthy missional church. Does that make sense? Now do you have questions about this grid or the assignment, the homework assignment? Now let me tell you the cool part about this assignment that's great for all the pastors in the room is that pastors are notorious for stressing over this assignment and thinking, oh no, now what's going to happen when we do this? But the goal of the pastor is not to lay awake tonight worrying about what's going to happen in this assignment tomorrow. The goal of every pastor is to make sure their parishioners lay awake all night, worrying about where they're going to put the X and the arrow on this grid tomorrow morning. Okay? So it's really a fun exercise. It may sound a little bit overwhelming. I mean, honestly, we've had some people who have not come back because they're fearful of doing this. We're not going to embarrass, humiliate, or call anybody out in the process, okay? That would not be civil, compassionate, or Christ-honoring to do that. And we are not going to do that. We're going to model that for you tomorrow. There's going to be some people who are going to say some things that are going to be a little bit startling probably tomorrow morning, saying, you felt that way? There's going to be people saying some things tomorrow that say, you felt that way too. I can identify with what you said. That's what I'm feeling about this church as well. Those may be difficult things, those may be positive things, all right? You're going to be amazed by how the Spirit moves through this X marks the spot exercise. It's an incredible thing. Over and over and over again we see it. When we did it at Faith Reformed Church in Linden, we divided the room in half. And we put one group in one room and a group in another room. Gary had one half, I had the other half. It was kind of that soundproof booth thing, right? We had no clue what was going on in the room. We each did it, and we came back together. You could have laid both maps over the top of each other and had a virtual transparency of them. Both rooms felt the same way about the church in the same proportions around this architecture. And it was amazing is they like, okay, we all know where we're at, and now we know what we need to do. We can do this. If you're not feeling good and you go to the doctor says, I don't have a clue what's wrong with you. Good luck. See you later. Please pay at the front door on the way out. How are you feeling about that? Well, what if the doctor says, go to the pharmacy, get 10 of these, take one a day for 10 days, and you will feel better. Call me if you don't. Okay. I'm okay with that. In 10 days, I'm going to do better. And I can handle the 10 days knowing that there's a better coming, right? So do you get the idea of what we're doing tomorrow morning? Gary, any other kind of words you want to throw out? I'll throw a couple more guidelines out here. So know that tomorrow morning, if you come and you're prepared to share your little 1 minute, while your X is there, 1 minute or less, because some people can do it in about 15 seconds. If you want to share about that, you get to share it, and nobody gets to come. Nobody can say, oh, but no, no crosstalk tomorrow. You get to say what you feel, you get to say what your experience is, and we're going to respect that and listen to that because it's going to speak to all of us in some way about First Reformed Church or Estrover Sanborn, okay? We ready to go? You guys are awesome. Thank you for a wonderful evening. It's been a lot of fun for Gary and I'm going to pray for you. And we're going to send you on your way to a sleepless night, okay? Yeah. Lord God, we know that you are Lord of the church. We know you have a deep and passionate love for the church. We know that you care deeply for the churches that are represented in this room tonight. And we pray, God, that as we reflect on who we are, we think about the reality of who we are, and we come to you with the desire for vitality of your Spirit to flow through who we are, that you will work through this simple exercise to bring grace and truth to bear in our midst tomorrow. So I pray, God, that the things we've learned now might take a root deep in our hearts and might grow in ways that are surprising and wonderful beyond what we expected. I pray that the hope that you give us in your word, the power you give us by your Spirit, would be ours to claim and enjoy and experience as we continue on this journey together. In Jesus' name we pray.